Hello, and welcome to this on-location edition of the Purple Journal podcast. I am your host, Joe Johnson, owner of Purple PTSD in Vikings territory, co-host of Morning Joes. You guys thought you might laugh. I'm for two weeks in a row, I'm just blowing it. But the reason I named the show that is because both Joe and Luke are not at their typical recording spots, so we're fancy.
We're on secret missions.
We're worldwide. Joe, how you do?
If I mentioned where I am, I'd have to kill every listener.
Which is just all of our parents. So
I was gonna say.
I thought we agreed we'd put them in homes. But yeah, Mr. Joe is here.
I am.
He's actually at his cabin, which is where exactly? If you want to give out that information.
Central western Minnesota.
Ooh. I'm jealous.
All those fans that are gonna want to stalk me, I better not give that out.
Well, I would. So there's that.
Yeah, well, that's reason enough.
I never really know where Joe is. I just leave money in an envelope in a P.O. box every once in a while. Joe writes for Purple PTSD, Vikings territory. He's the editor of those sites as well, and he writes for the Sports Post. I think I'm coming down with something.
Must be the bye week blues.
Yeah, or the letdown from all the just adrenaline of how psyched I am about this team right now. I wonder if you're as psyched as I am, Luke Braun. Talk about a segue to an introduction. How you doing, man?
I don't know if I'll ever be as psyched as you are, but it feels pretty good.
It's an emotional roller coaster, being me.
Always is.
Luke writes for Purple PTSD Vikings territory, and he's the co-host of the Pocket Protectors podcast as well on the Climbing the Pocket network. I'm alluding to this with my energy, and because I brought it up like 3 times in the minute we've been on the show. But I am bullish on the Vikings right now, and I wanted to, before we hop into any news or break down how the game went, just get a general feeler. And I full disclosure, I know where Joe is because we did the Morning Joe show yesterday. So I'll actually start with Luke.
Well, first we should just get a graph on your emotions.
That's for I have a team of doctors right now.
Real talk.
Studying
the
me.
Vikings have a love for the game algorithm.
Yeah.
That's real, and I want to see it so bad.
What does that mean?
I don't know, but it's insinuated that it helps them get Daniil Hunter, so whatever it is, I'm good with that.
In the draft?
They used it to help evaluate draft picks, and that's part of the draft process.
They basically took whatever highlight Madden would say that about Favre from and boiled it down to a point where you can find
what it could possibly be. But Rick Spielman in a private media meeting, like a not broadcasted media meeting, I think it was Andrew Kramer reported that was they have a love for the game model that goes into their draft evaluations, and I love it.
Yeah, that's a good name, too. I mean, it could be... You could call it something else and just say, how much drive does this person have, but...
I think that's true. When you hear them talk about it off and on, they've always said, this guy really loves to play football, and it seems like they are trying to surround themselves with players who love to play and will work even harder to get better at it. I can see that.
Yeah, it's a value you want to look for, and they're just finding a more objective way than sitting in a room for 15 minutes and seeing what vibe you get, which has led to some pretty bad choices across the whole league.
Yeah, that's I wonder if that's clearly it's a newer thing for the team, but that's really interesting because there's so many guys that have the talent and don't necessarily want to put the work in because they close by on that talent. So clearly it's working for them. But yeah, I mean, how do you feel about the state of the team going into the bye week? The reason I'm bullish, or at least pretending to be bullish for effect, is that the defense seems to be playing at levels that it did last year. They seem to have figured it out, especially when you compare them to earlier in the season when I was suicidal recording from the side of a freeway. And the offense, it struggled a little bit. Obviously, they lost the turnover battle against the Lions, but just seeing that, to me, kind of washed away a lot of the fears that I had.
Yeah, I'm sky high on Mike Zimmer right now. There's been a lot of ink this week after the Lions game on how Mike Zimmer fixed the defense, and a lot of kind of scheme looks. And there's actually a lot of plays. Basically, every opponent that we've had watched the Rams game and did that. And we also, Mike Zimmer, I think, mentioned in a press conference that, the Rams game was this tipping point for him where he realized, okay, every defense has copied me, which means every offense is practicing every week against this scheme, and they're kicking my butt. So now I have to change what I do. And that meant taking away a lot of the single high coverages and going to more, two safety coverages, cover two, and this, deep quarters concept that they stole from Michigan State, which I think is dope. So essentially, after that, that Thursday night blowout on that 10-week break, he redesigned a whole bunch of things and basically innovated again, which is amazing that just happened on the fly and has put up largely pretty good results, except for losing to Drew Brees, which, fair, he's Drew Brees.
And you could argue that game wasn't a Brees thing. I mean, he had 120 yards.
Yeah, he got a lot of short fields and stuff.
You say that, Luke, because I heard Kevin Seifert, former Star Tribune Vikings writer for a long time and now with ESPN, he was talking about that, what you referenced, Zimmer in the press conference. He says, I haven't figured out yet if he was trolling or not in saying that about everybody copying him and all this stuff. But he goes, I'm not sure, but it sounds like what you're saying is that there's definitely some there, and that he did go out and change things up. We certainly heard that he simplified the defense from what it was going on early on, but it sounds like he brought in some new aspects that are helping them play better and helping other teams not be so successful against them.
Yeah, I should give credit. I'm citing the work of Ted Wynn at The Athletic, who he's a national writer, but he kind of dove into Mike Zimmer's defensive adjustments, and it was like a two-part article where he also talked about Belichick doing the same thing on offense. But yeah, it's a lot more cover two and quarters coverage or cover four, which is none of this is stuff that the Vikings haven't practiced. He's just deciding to use it more often.
Okay. And I was going to say that, to change
and a lot more
it.
combo coverages where you do one coverage on one side of the field and another coverage on the other side of the field, which is something all the players are absolutely really familiar with. He's just calling it more often. So it's more of a in-game decision-making process, which is exactly what I said. I said a whole bunch after the Rams game and all that. You have to be smarter on Sundays, and this is basically them doing exactly that.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that he's not just a one-trick pony with his great defense. Double A gap blitzes, and he can do something else and mix.
He's backed off those almost entirely.
Yeah, you have to adjust, you have to innovate, you have to keep changing, because everybody goes and looks at the film and figures you out, and so you have to then respond to that in some way and maybe try to stay a step ahead of them.
It's amazing at his age that he can continue to innovate. You look at a guy like Norv Turner who basically quit because of that. I know that when the defense was taking a lot of heat, when Zimmer was taking a lot of heat earlier in the season, we raised that question on this show, and we're going to see whether or not he can innovate his way out of this, or if he's reached his peak as a head coach or as a defensive mind. And it appears that it's the former, not the latter, so that's good. I mean, it's also good that they have the depth and the people on defense to be able to make those changes, and that they're not completely overdrafted to do just one thing really well, right. And they can do other things too.
Got to understand Norv though, Joe, because Panthers are pretty dang good with his offense. People are saying that Norv's
he's having a good year.
Cam Newton, so
yeah. I wonder. I don't follow the Panthers at all, but I wonder how much of that is because they fit the model that he wanted, as opposed to him actually changing his mind about what he's doing. I don't think Cam Newton's running a whole bunch of audibles or anything, unless he's just running the ball. But yeah, it was a good game. I mean, it was A lot of the headlines were the resurgence of the defense. We'll get into that. There were a couple things that happened in the news that I wanted to get your guys' opinions on. First was the Amir Abdullah signing. I know nobody in the world probably cares about this as much as I do, but I thought it was interesting only in that he's a Big Ten player, show over, mic drop. But also that he was highly drafted. He was top 3 running back prospect coming out of college. He had injuries and fumble concerns in Detroit, but he had good games against the Vikings, and I think that's where that came from. But I wondered why they would add someone like that at this point during the season. I guess that's my question.
Probably better than Rock Thomas, I think is the simple answer.
Rod Thomas can't stay healthy either.
Yeah.
Okay. I was wondering if maybe they thought if Cook has a setback or something, they have a guy who's similar in pass catching ability. Was what I was going for.
It could be an athleticism thing too. Amir Abdullah he had absurd testing at the combine, so I bet the Vikings were pretty high on him during that draft process. So I wondered, like, it was he's available kind of thing, and we actually really liked this guy. And even though he never put the vision together and he never put ball security together, those are things that maybe you think you can coach or something like that, and then you decide you're going to give it a shot.
He had some injuries, didn't he?
Yeah, he had some significant injuries too, season-ending stuff.
Yeah, so, he still has the burst, in my opinion, of like, he still has that athleticism, and it's more of a field reading and vision issue. It's a Trent Richardson kind of thing, but to way less of an extreme.
Yeah, and I mean, as much as I liked him in college, I never thought he had the body to be like a 20 to 25 carry a game guy. Yeah. That didn't make. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's been one of the better receiving backs in the league, at least according to like PFF and production. He's been a very good receiving back, but not a very good blocking back, which makes it really hard to use him because usually that's like a tell of the running back's not going to block because they will know that he's bad at it. And he's been a very underwhelming runner, and he's been overtaken by Theo Riddick and Kerryon Johnson over the last 2 years. And he also lost his kick return job in Detroit, so that's why Detroit moved on. Ultimately, I kind of think this is you just upgraded at your 4th running back position. I don't know how excited you want to decide to be about that.
Yeah, it just says
I shot a flare into this guy.
they're committed to the running game to open help out Cousins back there and really tell the teams that we're going to run the ball and they want some depth in position. And because I can't remember the last time we've had 4 running backs.
And then you go pick up first, second round talent guy late in the season. It does seem like they are really committed to that. And I saw a lot of arguments this week in the fantasy realm about how do you, as a fantasy owner, look at playing Latavius Murray versus Dalvin Cook. Apparently he's available in a lot of leagues, and none of the ones I'm around because it's a bunch of Vikings fans. Cook, but the crux of it was it's hard to take the ball away from Murray when he's arguably playing the best football of his career here, and I think that's something that I don't want to say he's been overviewed. Like, I don't think he's getting maybe enough as much credit as he deserves, but he's been a rock.
He's a, no pun intended. He's still for the missing Cook, who's been out for 2 seasons now. Most of those seasons so far, and for me, it's just they know how important this running game is to them. They want depth of position. They're gonna run those top two guys and then spell them with these other guys if need be. The fact that that they want him now. They aren't going to sit around and wait for your 4th running back to get healthy to get him on the field. They want availability for 4 running backs right now. That's where I find it really interesting, and to me, it says a lot about what they think of their ability to run the ball.
Murray hits the right hole every time, and it's so big because he's probably I would imagine he's the slowest guy. I don't have that confirmed, but I imagine he's the slowest guy in the RV room. But he hits the right hole every time, and you don't need to be that fast if you're running behind the right blocks.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about the offensive line, basically every show we've ever done for 3 years. But
The best game of the last 3 seasons from the O-line last week.
yeah, and we talked a lot about the will they won't they Brian O'Neill stuff, and that was announced I think like the day after we did our show last week, where we touched on that a lot. That's, to be honest, a lot of my enthusiasm comes from that too. I think with the bye week, getting Compton back, and then having somebody who isn't Rashad Hill on the line anywhere, and giving that unit time to get to know one another as all 5 getting towards the playoffs, that's super exciting too.
I've certainly said what I thought about Brian O'Neill Tuesday and throughout the season, so I'm happy that he's getting in and doing well. It amazes me to think about when they picked up Tom Compton and early on in training camp and the preseason, what have you. I just thought, wasn't even sure if he was going to start. I thought, that maybe he would just because of familiarity with Cousins. But it's interesting now that we're looking at him as this rock over on the left side of the line, and really we want him back right now. So it's kind of funny how perceptions change it.
Yeah, I was on him I remember when he got signed, and a lot of people thought he was a camp body, and I was like, man, he's gonna push Easton. And then Easton got hurt, and it wasn't a competition. But I don't know. I just wanted to take that victory lap. I called it. You Eastons.
Yeah, you have been the Compton guy. Yeah, it's a lot of just positivity, I guess. And that's easy to say because they won that game. They very well could have lost it in years past if the defense. I told Joe Luke on the show yesterday that we talked about how the defense earlier in the season didn't have that resiliency, like after a turnover. I think you mentioned against the Saints, like everyone knew that they were going to score that touchdown.
I think I tweeted something to the same effect during the game.
Yeah. And to see them overcome those turnovers in the Lions game, hold them to a field goal, hold them to that. I think that was that horrible lateral that Stafford threw was after one of our turnovers. I can't remember. But
I want to go into that play at some point.
Let's do it.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Obviously, the pressure got there, but I think something that was also featured in that in the article I talked about before was the key to that play being made was a really, really veteran-style read and reaction by Holton Hill. He was in the corner spot and basically read the play, understood exactly what route concept they were running, a route concept that I believe scored it or got a huge chunk play from the Rams when they ran the same thing. And Holton Hill read it and undercut the route that Stafford wanted to throw to, and he had to pull it down. And then the pressure was able to get there, and that's when he scrambled. And then he just did something super boneheaded, and it ended up in a touchdown in the other direction. But I just thought it was huge that Holton Hill of all people had this massive impact play. It's not going to show up on the box score, and he's not going to get any credit for it because everybody's rightfully obsessing over Danielle Hunter. But really, Holton Hill made that play possible.
Yeah, with Danielle Hunter, he was just standing around on the freeway with his thumb out. Oh, there's the ball. I think I'll scoop it up and score. It's neat that you say that, and someone will notice it, and that's those people in over at TCO Performance Center. They will appreciate that, and I think it goes to just how well this defense is playing with substitutes in there. Xavier Rhodes and no Mike Hughes, Anthony Barr's out, and they're still playing very well. It's exciting to me to think how deep this defensive unit is. I mean, we've all crabbed here and there about Zimmer draft, first round defenders year after year after year after year, but they're building hopefully a unit that's strong on the front side and deep all the way through, so that it can carry you through a whole season and the postseason. So that's to hear you say that about Hill.
I don't want to frame it this way because I don't know if some of the improvements on defense coincided just with the changes that the team was forced to make. But it does feel like an addition by subtraction situation with Holton Hill and Curse playing in the secondary more. Again, it could very well be a myriad of factors that have turned the tide. But
well, they're using Curse a different way than they would use Sendejo too. I mean, it's like a fifth.
He's playing slot corner. He's trading snaps with Mackenzie Alexander. He's not really, Sendejo's been out, but I don't think Jaron Curse would be taking snaps away from Sendejo. They'd be on the field together.
Yeah, that's what
Well, I meant more of him as a slot guy versus, what Hughes was doing.
Yeah, well, Hughes was having some rookie growing pains, and Mackenzie Alexander's been kind of a catastrophe. So, yeah, in the slot, Jaron Curse has been far and away the best player, which is crazy. He does not have the profile of a slot corner. He has horrible agility testing. He's 6'4". These I would say Golden Tate types, but obviously that isn't the case. But that kind of type of receiver should destroy a guy like Jaron Curse. But he's been playing with really nice technique, and he hasn't been perfect. He's been, probably I think he's been like a league average slot corner, but that's awesome. We have a league average slot corner. We got the seventh rounder as a safety.
Luke, is this with more of that we're seeing from Curse in there now? Is this a result of that adjustment or new innovation that Zimmer's done, or just throwing him in that slot corner instead of Mackenzie Alexander?
I think the slot position in Zimmer's defense, no matter what the adjustments have been, it's always been really hard mentally. It's been a really mentally challenging position to play, and Jaron Curse was drafted in spite of his poor athletic testing, in part because at Clemson he was a really cerebral defensive back, so it kind of fits for that reason. And when you're in Zimmer's defense, you can kind of get away with not being as good of an athlete in the secondary if you make the right reads and do the right things and go the right direction.
Yeah, it's and really quickly, just Luke. So I texted you too, but I can hear your mic a little bit, just in case you can fix it. But what do you attribute the record-breaking day to? Looking back at some of the performances against Stafford, this defense has had. They've had big sack total days, and then they've been destroyed by him. I'll go to you.
Being in the house, Joe, I was finally showed up for a game, so that's why it happened.
Who?
Good luck. Me.
Oh, yeah, that's true. The Oberly effect.
There you go.
But it seemed like, and I'll pretend like I knew this from watching it, that they weren't doing a lot of blitzes or anything. They were just either coverage sacks or a whole team effort.
I said it a couple times to the guy next to me. I said, God, they're just doing this mostly with the rushing four. I mean, Mackenzie Alexander did get a sack later in the game on a blitz, but generally, nobody touched. Generally, they were rushing four, and they were getting home, and they were just Danielle Hunter was just a beast, and and Tom Johnson was wreaking havoc up the middle. It was they played well. They went after it, especially against a defense that had given up the second fewest quarterback hits to that point in the league, which blew me away.
Yeah, and the Vikings, I think, had 21 sacks on the season and basically increased that amount by 50%, we discovered after my nosebleed on Tuesday. Did Luke disappear?
We might have lost him. He's in Rangoon. So yeah, I don't know.
Sorry, I'm having equipment issues.
Any thoughts on what they did differently to get home against this defensive or this offensive line that was 3-4 pretty decent?
I don't think they did that much differently. I think it was more of an execution thing. They did, and I also think a lot of it was coverage. They just Matt Stafford didn't really have the ability to go in the directions that he wanted to go very often. And like I kind of detailed before, that led to the fumble 6, that led to a whole bunch of these sacks where he wanted to do something and then he didn't. Some of it was also the Lions just being the Lions. They ran a screenplay where nobody turned around for the ball. They ran 4 guys out there and all 4 of them blocked. So somebody obviously did the wrong thing. I find that hilarious. And I think it's just like Danielle Hunter and Everson Griffin handing those tackles a couple of the worst games of their careers.
Yeah, it was interesting, like you said, to see Stafford. All of a sudden, he'd drop back, he'd look, and he'd be looking sick. It was almost, you could almost visibly see him say, "Shit."
Well, you have to wonder how much of that. Oh, sorry, Joe. I was just gonna say, the Golden Tate effect. You know, you get rid of a guy who's responsible for 90 to 100 catches a season. You have a bunch of guys who are good situationally but aren't number one guys. It brings more question marks. If Lions fans were pissed about that move before the game, they have to just be. I mean, that situation in Detroit seems to be getting worse by the day.
This feels, if I were a Lions fan, that would have felt, because I mean that was just a dominating performance, right? Like they just got their souls crushed. I would feel like my season just ended. Like I'd start looking up mock drafts.
For sure. I mean, and they were only a game out of first place. It didn't feel like that, you know. They didn't have that momentum, but realistically, they weren't a terrible team.
Yeah, which is too bad because they're going. I think they're going to Soldier Field this week, and they're going to get their hats.
Yeah.
And beat the Bears, you know, and be mad at what happened and rebound, but they'll probably still be sulking
yeah, they pay the Lions, Vikings, then the Lions again, so that's gonna be a rough stretch for them. Hopefully they can make it competitive against the Bears, though, at least at home. That'd be nice.
Yeah, it's a lot harder to have a productive offense when you lose possibly the best the best after catch receiver in football. Really hard to get that. It's really hard to get moving when you lose that kind of asset. Which is amazing because that is a thing that they did to themselves for a third-round pick. Right?
We talked about this last week, like with the why of it, like whether Patricia's trying to show the team that it's his locker room and that it wasn't the type of guy he wanted as a leader on his team. I don't know if there's been any other like reputable things to come out about why they did that, but
I think his contract's just up. He's in a contract year. And I guess that he wasn't part of the team's long-term plans. And part of that might be because Kenny Golladay has looked pretty good. Part of that might just be, we just don't see his role as worthy of the contract that we're going to have to pay him. So instead of letting him go and hoping you can get compensatory picks or whatever, they just offloaded him for a third.
Yeah, I can see some
bad pick for him. That's not a bad pick. It's just, it's got to be exactly as you guys are describing what Stafford was seeing. You know, he's used to knowing where his safety blanket is, and all of a sudden he's not there, and the other guys are not exactly where they're supposed to be. And he's got to eat the ball.
You know, it is very true about players that are legends at the quarterback position, especially that circumstances are very important for these guys, who their coach is, what teams they end up on, the guys they play with. But I do, as just a football fan, I do want to see Stafford not struggle, because it's not like he's accomplished a whole lot, but he's had a lot of flashy numbers. He's played with some really great receivers, and I've always wondered how good he acted, if he was the 5,000-yard guy that we saw, or if he was just a guy with a big arm who played with really talented wide receivers. And having said that, I don't think Aaron Rodgers can't put up huge numbers with terrible receivers either. I think he'd get something out of them. I think we've seen that in his career, but it'll be interesting to see how he does.
I'm going to take it that Stafford didn't come from the Big Ten. Just a guess.
He's an SEC guy, so I particularly dislike him. I'm a hack. That's the next. Actually, Joe is a hack is the next thing on the agenda.
Joe is a hack edition of the Purple Journal.
Hey, that's every edition. Boom. Take that, me. I did think it was. It's nice that Hunter was recognized as the NFC Defensive Player of the Week. They talked a lot on the broadcast about him not getting the accolades he deserves on a national level, perhaps because he plays next to Everson Griffin, or he's on that great line, or he's young, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's just it's amazing that he has gotten to the level that he has.
Is he going to be the new Thielen? That now that something that we've known for years around here, and now everybody's going to start picking up on it finally. That this kid is a beast, and he's a force to be reckoned with. And when with Everson back in there, to take some attention away, and when Thielen gets Diggs back, they are tough to handle. He was a one-man wrecking crew. I shouldn't say that. There was one sack that what's his name? Tom Johnson had 2.5 sacks, and there was one that he took on a double team and allowed some other guys to get home on him. So he had a great game too. The whole defense played well, but Danielle Hunter. They have been saying this. That's why they drafted him. They saw him as a physical specimen, and they thought that Patterson could coach him up, and so far it's happening. And he's it's beginning to look like sky's the limit. So now they're going to have to say, well, I guess we're going to have to admit that Danielle Hunter is maybe a top 5 defensive end in the league.
Yeah, and he loves the game. How do you, we talked about Griffin's return last week, and that he probably, I think Luke, you were the one that said he probably had the worst game of his career for obvious reasons. How did you think he performed as part of that unit? He was his old self for sure. Going against not a very easy matchup in Taylor Decker. Taylor Decker's a good left tackle who, aside production-wise, exactly the same season as Brian O'Neill. Just saying. But that's a good matchup, or that's a tough matchup. And I think part of it against the Saints too is that Teron Armstead is like an elite left tackle. But it was also a matter of rust and a matter of just kind of getting back into the mental space of being a wrecking ball. But he was definitely his same tenacious self. The pressure didn't just come from one side of the line. Everson Griffin had a huge impact. It is.
Tenacious E.
Ooh, that's a good one. You're cranking out these nicknames like crazy. Speaking of a nickname that didn't detonate, the atom bomb didn't end up breaking Megatron's record.
No, that's.
And
one of my 4 regression candidates that played.
Ooh.
That was the piece. That was the article I wrote after the show last week. I had 5 regression candidates, some regressing up, some regressing down, because regression can go both ways. If you are playing uncharacteristically poorly, that usually means that you're going to kind of bounce back. One of them was Diggs, who didn't play, but the other 4, which you can go find in the article, all came to fruition on Sunday, and I expect them to continue to come to fruition.
Yeah, that was
one of them, and he's not going to be getting 100-yard games every time. Eventually, they start suffering him.
You put Diggs back in the game, and he's a hell of a lot closer than he was this Sunday. It was clear what was going on. And had I known that Diggs wasn't going to play, I don't know that I would have picked that over under.
It's funny because my initial response before the game was, "Oh wow, he's going to break the record for sure. Who else are they going to throw it to?" And that obviously, and Chad Beebe.
Yeah,
the Beebe
gun led the team in receiving for the game.
And he actually looked. He had one catch. I think it was in the second half. I think it was at the end of the third quarter where it was like a 7-yard slant, and then he ran for like 10 yards afterwards, picked up the first down, where he actually looked like fast. I remember thinking like, wow.
He is fast. Chad?
No.
Maybe? Oh.
Treadwell. I know. I've always heard Treadwell's quick. Like from 0 to 10, he's the quickest. Then from 10 to 40, he's like me. So he might have been in that sweet spot, but that was encouraging. But yeah, I mean, I think and I said this on Morning Joe's. I think the biggest, one of the biggest victors in terms of reputation or what they mean to the team from the Lions game was Diggs. For obvious reasons.
I think all three of us have talked about this early in the season, how we posed the question. I guess I remember posing the question: is they are symbiotic. They are friends and they competitive, but they also help each other because Diggs is it's a pick your poison situation with those two. They're both excellent route runners and they're both going to get open. They're both fast enough to get some separation, and they both have great catching radius. So they are tough to handle. So who are you gonna double from time to time? And And Thielen's going to go on the slot, and Diggs is going to go outside. He's going to take the defense away, and it just opens it up for him. I thought that's what was happening all along, and I think we saw it last week. So I expect Thielen, when Diggs returns in Chicago, to have a much, much better game.
Yeah, Luke, what do you, in terms of like X's and O's, like what did they do to slow Thielen down? Was it...
Zimmer touched on it in the press conference. They doubled him relentlessly. They really didn't respect anybody else on the Vikings offense, and it kind of worked out. I mean, the offense only scored 17 points, but they basically said, okay, we dare you to beat us with Laquan Treadwell and Aldrick Robinson and this dude you just brought up from the practice squad. Thankfully, Tease Tabor on the Lions is an abject disaster. He's the TJ Clemmings of cornerbacks, and Chad Beebe was able to get like a huge... Like, he just... got dusted by a practice squad guy. I think it's just the funniest thing in the world. But, yeah, good game for Beebe. Treadwell had a nice game, although the interception was kind of caused by him not being fast enough to be respected on a clear-out route. That he was running a fly down the sideline, which was meant to clear Darius Slay out of the play. But Darius Slay didn't respect it because Slay runs like a 4.36 and Treadwell's slow. So he was able to actually keep his eye on the quarterback while staying with that, and that's why he was able to read that and pick it off. Cousins should probably also have recognized that that was happening and seen that Slay was peaking and waited a little bit longer for that clear-out route, for that route concept to develop a little more. But I will also add that Darius Slay has gotten that interception against us, that exact same interception against us, with Teddy in his rookie year. He basically got an interception on the exact same thing, and Teddy actually threw that one another time against Marcus Peters. There was a really good Twitter conversation I had with a couple of listeners about it. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, they doubled Thielen all day, and they basically just made the offense be productive with, you know, Robinson and Beebe and Treadwell. It would have been amazing if Robinson would have come down with that catch for the really touchdown. You know, it was a gorgeous throw. He didn't have any separation, so it was, and he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he would have been what?
He's coming around that defender though. He's coming around him, falling towards the ground, and then trying to make that catch. It would have been amazing. He's right, because that was a difficult catch. Might have been a good throw, but the odds of him making it were very slim, even though it did hit him in the hands, because he's just coming around the corner, seeing the ball, boom, it's in his hands, and it's down. So that's a heck of a tough grab. I don't fault him for that.
No, neither do I. I think you said it too, Joe, that Thielen would have had it. Diggs probably would have had it. Treadwell would have been 10 yards behind it.
Treadwell would have been targeted, let's be honest.
But the other obvious big news story coming out of the game was the return of Dalvin Cook. He had that big run. I think it was clocked as the fastest play so far in this season, which apparently from the fantasy articles I was reading had the NFL world on fire. I'm like, I don't know if that's true.
So whatever.
It's neat.
Yeah.
And he was asked about it, and he was like, wait, I was faster than Tyreek Hill?
Yeah, I wonder, you know, those are relatively newer stats. You know, I think Diggs had one of the top 5 fastest plays last season, and I think Xavier Rhodes or Trey Waynes had the other one. There's 2 Vikings in the top 5. But I I didn't know he was a guy with that type of speed. That's true too, though. What Joe, what you just said.
Yeah, he said he was trying to protect his hammy, so he said he could have kicked it in even further, which is exciting to hear. But it's hard to believe too. I fully expect him that. I wouldn't have, with the hammy and the knee. You don't want to necessarily open it to everything you got and risk blowing out one of them again. So I'm glad he did. I just want this guy to get healthy. Man, was he fun to watch when he can go. Whew.
Yeah.
That play was sprung by an excellent reach block by the man of the hour.
Riley Reef? Brian O'Neill.
No, Brian O'Neill. Reach blocks are really hard. I think I've talked about this on the show before, but they're the kind of block where you line up on one side of a guy, and you have to get to the other side of him and seal him off from there. And it's a very common zone blocking thing. You have to have a lot of agility to do it, which I think is part of why they were endeared to O'Neill in the first place. and he executed a beautiful one on that big 70-yard run, and that was basically the key block on the whole play. Once Cook was past that block, it was pretty much curtains for everybody else.
Yeah, my dad was at the game, and he said you could tell he was in the nosebleeds, but he said you could tell that was a home run. As the second they handed it off, the blocking was so good.
Triple, though.
I didn't hear that, but I'm sure it was a Big Ten, something with the Big Ten.
No, I said it was only a triple because he got tackled.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Again,
can you tell that he was on my fantasy team and I'm bitter that he didn't score? Anyway, go ahead.
I haven't let you know this, Joe, but I've won 4 games in a row in our fantasy league somehow. So I am.
One of them was against me, so no lollipops.
Yeah, that is true, but it's me though. So, yeah, I hate to keep just being such a rube about it, but I do feel like everything is coming together for this team. You know,
it was the Lions. It was the Lions, Joe.
Yeah, but then I think they should have beat the Saints. The Saints beat the Rams. I know that's not how it works, but that's how my brain works. You know, they're 5-3-1. They have the bye week at the best possible time. They're in control of their destiny. They have a pretty arduous schedule the next month, but we'll know in a month's time where this team stands. I just have
save a little bit till after Sunday night in a week or so. That if they can beat the Bears down there in Chicago, then you can get as giddy as you want on the show, and I can't say a damn thing.
I will say that, you know, they gotta fix in terms of having the bye week at the right time. Cousins talked last week about the numbers they keep on the whiteboard. I referenced it on the show last week about the record the team has when they win the turnover battle, when they don't, stuff like that. And they lost the turnover battle, but they still won. I don't think they can do that in Chicago, you know, the way that they did against the Lions. They very well could have lost that game. That game could have got away from them as well if the defense hadn't stepped up. So it's not all, you know, completely just amazing, but I feel like things are coalescing to get to the point where they need to be. They're a lot better than they were a month ago, but that does concern me. The offense, I don't want to call it a regression because, you know, Diggs didn't play, but that has to get showed up for sure. I don't know if you guys have any confidence in that or from what you've seen.
Well, they still scored their average, although they got a defensive touchdown. They put 24 points on the board, and so they're not. I wouldn't call it a regression. You know, Cousins obviously had less, you know, yardage. He also had less passing attempts, and because they were emphasizing the run, and the run was successful. And
yeah. I guess I'm looking at it because they're not airing the ball. I guess I should say the turnovers are a little more worrisome than anything else. You know, they're not going to throw the ball a million times like they did against the Rams every week, especially with the run game working. But it's going to come down to turnovers, I think, when it's all said and done. And I'm really hoping that the season doesn't end with Cousins fumbling a ball or a batted ball getting picked off or something. But
you know exactly that's what's going to happen.
I'm not
come to terms with that.
I'm not even joking. I've seen it so vividly. It's like the butterfly effect, like reading notes brings me to it. Like I just have a feeling I'm gonna have to defend Cousins this offseason after something like that happens, and that'll probably kill me, according to my team of doctors that are on standby. But
the offense still has some pretty crucial issues outside of the 70-yard run, which was an excellent play. The run game was abysmal outside of that run. It averaged like 2 yards a carry. I think it was successful on like 25% of his plays, which is just like piss poor. They still had that fumble, the toss play that didn't go well. That fumble really concerns me because it's November, and that's something that you're drilling in July. Like, those are July mistakes that are being made in November, and that really concerns me. It might just be a Cook rust thing.
Yeah.
It might just be a timing not quite being there thing, but that's the kind of thing that you really need to clean up immediately, because those kind of mistakes are not the kind of mistakes that you can afford in the playoffs. And I think, when they are able to execute without doing clown show things, they are able to keep pace with anybody in the league. But those kind of clown show things, you're lucky that like those drives, the really bad Cousins interception and the really bad fumble, both of those drives, I think the fumble didn't even turn into points. I think they went 3 and out, and the interception was they only managed to get 3. So like you're lucky that your defense bailed you out on that, but like you gotta clean that kind of thing up. And the run game is still hugely problematic. It's the addition or reintroduction of Cook into that gives everything a little bit of more of a home run threat. Like Murray, if he were on that carry, he probably still gets 25 yards, but he doesn't get 70, and that's awesome. But it's still something that like you have to you have to clean some of those things up if you want to be able to contend on a day where maybe your defense isn't there, or maybe the injuries continue to pile up. Like that's going to happen.
Coming into the game, though, I heard this stat though that the Lions' defense was not very good against the run, but what was symptomatic of it was they gave up some big plays, and the rest of their runs were run defense were 2 and 3 yards, like the way you were describing what happened to the Vikings on Sunday. So, I mean, it seems maybe they're a better defense than they had gotten credit for, because where they were getting burned was on big plays, just like the 70-yarder to Cook. So
that's a DeFilippo said
Damon
that.
Harrison was a big add too.
Pardon me?
Because I think that was the first game Damon Harrison played for the Lions, and he had like 7 run stops or something disgusting. So adding him probably helped their defense a lot too, which is something to credit, right? Because it's like, okay, maybe they weren't as bad as they were in the first few weeks, because those were weeks without Damon Harrison.
Yeah, and I think, Joe, you were referencing a DeFilippo quote about the run defense being a lot better than people are giving them credit for. They had a lot of those big plays. That Harris was a huge pickup, but they got him. I think he had a huge week last week too.
I'm going to give the running game a little bit of a pass yet, and I'm optimistic on them. I'm not bullish like Joe yet, but they're piecing their line back together. They're getting Cook back. There's been some injuries, and I think a pitch like you said, Luke, is rust for Cook. They got to get their timing down on that. I mean, they were doing that stuff in training camp. We saw it. So. They haven't really played probably that much together, because every time he would get back in the lineup, he would have something happen, he'd tweak his hammy, and he'd have to go back and rehab. So I think give them more time together. They got Elflein back in there. They hopefully get Tom Compton going again. I think just so they're moving in the right direction. So I'm okay with it. But continue. Like Luke's described, then he's right. There may be problems.
I feel like the line on paper with Compton back is better than any Vikings line we've had since before the injuries last season, where we had to mix everybody up in the playoffs. I think going into the playoffs with that unit is better than switching everybody around. Granted, some of the people they switched around are still in those positions. Like I think they moved Remmers during the playoffs to guard after Easton went down. But I think that it's just a better unit. I think, Luke, you said a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was last week, that having some of these guys back, they'll be at least all they need is a decent line. And I think that unit can do it as long as they don't have any more injuries. And that's what excites me. I think I am very glad that the bye week was late and that we have a few more games to figure this out. But, they are really tough games. And I wanted your guys' take on that. Namely on the Bears, like what you guys think. Since they're the number one team in the division, I'll kick it to Luke. Like, what your thoughts are on how good that team is? Are they maybe a year early in terms of their development? Are they winning despite Trubisky's struggles? Should I be as afraid of Khalil Mack as I am?
Yes, Khalil Mack is having a defensive player of the year type season, although he's been a little hobbled lately. I haven't looked too deeply into the Bears because they don't play on Sunday. because it's still the bye week, so I don't have all the, and I'm sure we'll be able to preview it like super in depth next week. But the broad strokes is that Mitch Trubisky has been kind of a disaster throwing, but he's been beating teams on the ground. And Khalil Mack and that defense, that defense actually is an argument to be the best defense in the league. And a lot of it is because of Khalil Mack, and a lot of it is because of their young secondary really pulling it together. You know, they had guys like Adrian Amos and Eddie Jackson that were a little younger that now have, you know, a little bit more experience under their belt, and that is they're starting to gel and become this like scary monsters of the midway type unit, and it's keeping them in games. And then Mitch Trubisky converts a 4th down with his legs, and suddenly you're losing.
They had a pretty good defensive unit last year. I think it was underrated, but it was strong. And
yeah, it was like young and up and coming, and now they're here.
And adding Mack to it is unbelievable. He did practice today, Wednesday. I saw. So I don't think he played last week, but he's coming back. He'll get ready and get back in there just in time for the Vikings. I hope he plays on Sunday so they see the Vikings get a good look at him, you know, while they're on their bye, so that they know what they're in for when they meet him in Schroeder Field in a week or so. And
we'll get into this a lot more next week, but is that still something that you guys consider to be a kryptonite of this defense, a mobile quarterback, or because of him being that one-dimensional and not being like a guy that can also beat you through the air? Do you think they'll be able to clamp down on that? Do they put somebody on him, assuming like Anthony Barr might be back?
Yeah, you just spy him all day, and he can't beat you through the air. That's got to be the game plan, right?
Yeah. He still airmails some of his passes. He's still got a tendency of doing that, and if they can they'll try to make him beat you with his arm rather than his legs. Put a spy on him and keep him in the pocket as best you can. And you know, they probably won't sack him as much if he's going to be looking to run like that. I mean, Stafford can run, but he's not looking to run as often as this kid probably is. So just have to try to beat you.
Yeah.
And you're going to ask about the Packers. Do it. It's not. No need to. They're done. Over. History.
Oh, I like that.
I'm kidding.
I'll take it.
They have to go undefeated to like
have a shot.
They've maybe got 1 or 2 more wins and 2 more losses to give throughout the whole rest of the season. They're going to have to start going into like run the table mode, which we've seen them do.
Yeah, it's not out of the question, but you have to wonder. I'm loving all the just discord amongst the drunken Scotties. Let's get into the predictors from last weekend and who won, since we will do the picks next week on next week's show, and we do have a rule change that should open this up for some people too. Luke, if you wanted to explain that.
Yeah, so we're going to take the like winner or loser of the game portion out of it, because basically what was happening is everyone picks the Vikings because you all are a bunch of homers, which is fine. Love you. But basically that meant that if the Vikings lose, we're doing a raffle between 2 people, and 35 people entered and only 2 people get in the raffle, and that sucks. So we're just going to have it be, the over-under itself, which I think is a little bit more interesting. And also it makes it easier to explain. Where, every time there would be 1 or 2 people that, you have to pick an over-under and the game, and they would only pick an over-under, and then I can't put you in the raffle because you didn't pick the game, and that sucks too. So
yeah,
it'll allow more people to be more in the contest, and I think that's better for everybody. But yeah, for the over-unders at least, so just reviewing them, last week we had the Kirk Cousins over-under 2.5 touchdowns. I think he only had the 1 to Thielen. We actually did have a few people take the under and for that in the win. Jay Taylor takes, Gage Salmons, and Sturdy won. So they got into the raffle. We also had Dan Bailey. Would he make all of his kicks?
And he did.
He did. I was on that one, I had a lot of company. Nate Denny, Nemok 7, Mike Anania 99, Cade Halvo NFL, PP 26 number 1 repeat offender, and Doug Nyans. And then we had a lot of people were with you overly on the Thielen over under 0.5 Calvin Johnson records broken. They all thought Everyone thought he would break the record. He didn't do it. And then we took the under on that one.
Yeah, like I said, though, if we known Diggs wasn't playing, I might have not picked him. I would have went with Dan Bailey. But
when that news came out, actually a few people responded to it picking Thielen. I think they were thinking the same thing that Joe Johnson was thinking, like, ooh, he'll get all the targets now.
Yep.
So here comes the gnome. Let me randomize this. It'll go to Jay Taylor Takes.
Yes.
With his pick of the Kirk Cousins under and a win. A very finessed pick. So make sure you DM me or the @purplePTSD account, and we can get your information, get you your gnome. Those have arrived. We've got some pictures from people who got them, which is awesome.
Yeah, and they are different this year. I switched it up because I felt like the other ones had kind of run their course. I like these ones better. They're more Vikings-y than the other ones. But yeah, those pictures make all this worthwhile, to be honest.
How about the score predictions? How'd that go?
I don't want to talk about that. We don't do that anymore. Executive decision.
Joe Johnson, you missed by 29 points. Obi missed by 14, so you got doubled up. And now there's a 34-point deficit with 7 regular season weeks to go. We do extend it into the playoffs, should that become relevant. But yeah, that was a rough one picking the Vikings to score 41 points, and they only put up 24.
I don't know what I was thinking. I knew it right at kickoff. I was like, this is a division game. That's not going to happen. What is wrong with me? But I guess I'm in the position of the Packers. I gotta run the table here.
Let's hope neither one of those things happen.
Yikes. Nothing would mean more to me. I'm 34. I have no children. I would rather beat Joe at this than have a child of my own at this point. So don't ruin this for me.
Everyone just turned the show off.
That's how I get them. I always look at like the amount of the show listened to, and it always cuts off at the 95%, and that's when I freestyle.
I have to make a weird joke about having a kid point.
Crap. Well, the good news is that the team's on the upswing, I guess. You guys always, speaking of regression, Luke, you guys always either bring me up from my depressions or bring me down from my manias. So that's
you can throw a cold wet blanket on anything, Joe.
Yeah, totally.
I'll ruin any emotion.
That's that sounded like a clip from like a Dateline episode, and like we should have heard the warning signs from Luke very early. Anyway,
you're not the first person to tell me that.
And she's dead now. Anyway, we'll be back next week, I believe. Thank you to everyone who does participate in the gnome giveaways and for sharing those pictures. That is really cool. And I will actually retweet those after we get off the show so people know that we actually do send the gnomes out. As I do believe I'm literally looking at Joe's trophy from last year.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that. What's that cup, brother?
That's it right there. Did you hear it? I'm hitting it against things. I'm denting it. I figured you would eventually have to send it back to me, but apparently that's not going to happen. So, anyway, we will be back next week. Morning Joes will be off on Friday, but back next week as well. Follow our social media. We still, even though it's the bye week, we got a ton of articles coming out on both sides, Purple PTSD and Vikings Territory. Follow us on social media.
It's Baiku week. Check out the Viking Haiku. Check out that story. Luke, I expect you and Joe both to write one.
I got one. I'm working on it. And if people listening, you can participate too. Tweet at Joe or at the sites Your Vikings Haiku. For the bye week.
I'll write it, but I refuse to do it in anything but upside down text.
Ooh.
In honor of Le'Veon Bell.
I'll take it.
But yeah, this has been the Purple Journal Podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week. Skull. Ooh, I clicked the wrong thing. Skull.